she was dressed to feel free. An emerald green dress, gold sandals, box braids with gold threads catching the light like she was born to shine. Jade Carter, a beautiful, elegant black woman, was walking out the door for one night. Just one night that belonged to her. And then his voice cut through the apartment like a blade. "Take that dress off." 4 words. No explanation, no apology. Just the voice of Park Jin-woo, Korean mafia boss, the most feared man in Koreatown, sitting in the dark with a glass of whiskey, watching her like she was something he owned. She turned. She looked at him. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't obey. She walked out anyway. What she didn't know was that somewhere in the Los Angeles night, 3 men already knew her name, already had photographs of her, already knew the exact shade of her dress. What she didn't know was that the man she had just left in the dark, the man with the dragon tattoos climbing his neck and ice water in his veins, wasn't trying to control her. He was trying to save her life. But here's the thing about secrets kept in the name of love. They don't protect people. They destroy them. Because before the night was over, a stranger would sit at her table and tell her things that made her blood run cold. Her best friend would confess something she had been hiding for months. And the most powerful, dangerous man she had ever loved would finally, for the first time in his life, tell her everything. Every decision he made without her. Every door he quietly closed. Every freedom he took while she wasn't looking. And what she said to him after changed both of them forever. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The city of Los Angeles had a way of making everything feel like it was on the edge of something. On the right night, from the right window, the skyline looked like a promise, all amber light and glittering distance, the kind of beauty that didn't ask questions and didn't offer answers. Jade Carter had learned to love that about it. She had learned to stand at the floor-to-ceiling window of the 53rd floor and breathe in that view the way other women breathed in fresh air, like it was the closest thing to freedom she was going to get on a Friday night, in an apartment that wasn't entirely her own. She turned from the window and looked at herself in the full-length mirror beside the closet. The dress was green, emerald green, the exact shade of the ring he had placed on her finger 6 months ago. And she had chosen it for that reason, without fully understanding why. Her box braids fell past her shoulders, the gold threads she had woven in catching the low light of the room like something deliberately beautiful. She looked like herself. She looked, for the first time in longer than she could remember, like a woman who was going somewhere she had chosen to go. She picked up the gold clutch from the edge of the dresser, checked her reflection one more time, and walked out of the bedroom. Park Jin-woo was sitting in the living room. He had not turned on more than one lamp. He sat in the low amber glow of it with a glass of whiskey balanced on his knee, and his eyes already on her. Not because he had heard her coming, but because he had been waiting. She understood this about him now. He was always waiting. Even in sleep, even in the middle of a conversation about something entirely ordinary, some part of him was always stationed at the perimeter of whatever space she occupied, watching the exits. She had told herself in the beginning that it was because of who he was, that a man who lived the way Jin-woo lived had no choice but to be vigilant, that the stillness in him was a professional habit and not something darker. She had told herself a lot of things in the beginning. "Where are you going in that dress?" His voice was low. It was always low. The kind of low that didn't need volume because the room had already quieted itself to listen. Jade kept her expression easy. "Girls' night. Brittany's been texting me since Tuesday." He didn't move. The whiskey glass didn't move. His eyes traveled the length of her, not with desire, not exactly, but with the particular attention of someone cataloging a detail they intended to remember. "Take that dress off." The apartment went very still. Jade turned to look at him fully. She had heard those 4 words before in other contexts, laughing, in the dark, with his mouth at her ear. But not like this. Not with that particular flatness. Not with his eyes doing that thing they did when he was calculating something she couldn't see. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." She stood there for 3 full seconds. She counted them. In those 3 seconds, she thought about the 2 years she had spent learning to love him, learning the silence between his words and the weight of what he didn't say. She thought about the first night they had met, a charity event she had been hired to style, him arriving late in a black suit that cost more than her monthly rent, watching her from across the room until she felt it like a hand on her shoulder. She thought about the way he had looked at her then, like she was the only thing in the room worth protecting. She thought about how, somewhere in the last 2 years, protection and possession had begun to sound like the same word in his mouth. "I'm going out, Jen." She picked up her keys from the entry table. Her hand was steady. She was proud of that. "Jade." She opened the door. What she did not see, what she could not have seen because she was walking toward the elevator with her chin up and her heart loud in her chest, was the expression that crossed his face in the moment the door closed. It was not anger. It was not the cold fury of a man accustomed to obedience. It was something rawer than either of those things. Something that flickered across his jaw and his eyes and the set of his mouth before he controlled it, before the mask came back up and he reached for his phone. He dialed without looking at the screen. "She left," he said when the call connected. "The green dress. You know what to do." He set the phone down. He sat in the dark with his whiskey and the amber glow of the one lamp and the view of the city that had made him rich and dangerous, and in ways he did not have language for, entirely alone. Little did Jade know that the man she was leaving had not said those 4 words to humiliate her. He had said them because 3 days ago, his most trusted lieutenant had intercepted a communication from the Kwan family, the network that had been circling Jinwoo's operation for the better part of 2 years, looking for an opening, looking for the one thing they could use. And what they had found, what they had been watching for weeks with the patience of people who understood that the most effective damage is the damage done quietly, was not a weakness in his organization or a gap in his security. It was her. Jade Carter, personal stylist, 28 years old, engaged to Park Jin-woo. Photographed twice in the last month leaving this building, her face and her figure and her particular style cataloged with the thoroughness of people who intended to use what they were collecting. The Kwan family did not move on men like Jin-woo directly. They had learned, at considerable cost, that direct confrontation produced funerals. They moved on the soft edges. They moved on the things a man loved without armor. The emerald dress, the gold clutch, the box braids with the gold threads. She would be easy to identify. Jinwoo had known, when he said those 4 words, that he could not explain any of this to her. Not without explaining everything else. The network, the rivals, the particular calculus of violence that governed his life in ways he had spent 2 years carefully keeping away from hers. He had built a wall between what he was and what they were together. And he had believed, genuinely believed, that the wall was a kindness. He was beginning to understand that the wall was the problem. In the Uber heading west toward West Hollywood, Jade sat with her clutch in her lap and her jaw tight, and Brittany's voice in her ear through the phone. He said what? "You heard me." "Jade, baby." He told you to take off the dress? Brittany, I need a moment. I'm on my way. I just need a drink, and I need you to make me laugh, and I need to not think about him for 3 hours. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The kind of pause that, had Jade been paying closer attention, had a shape to it. The kind of pause that contained something waiting to be said. Yeah, Brittany said finally. I'll be here. I'm already here. Jade looked out the window at the city moving past, the restaurants and the headlights and the people on sidewalks who had no idea what kind of night they were all walking into. She felt the anger in her chest begin to settle into something more complicated, the way it always did when she was away from him. When she was near him, everything simplified into reaction. When she was away, she had to feel all of it. The love that was real and the fear that was real, and the thing underneath both of them that she had been circling for months without naming. She did not know that 2 black SUVs were already moving through the Los Angeles grid, 3 men from the Kwan family, coordinating their positions around a bar in West Hollywood, where a woman in an emerald green dress was going to arrive in 11 minutes. She did not know that behind her, on the 53rd floor of a building in Koreatown, the man she was furious with was already moving. She did not know that the night she had planned as an act of freedom was the night that everything was going to change. She only knew the city looked beautiful from the window, and that she was finally, briefly, free. The bar was called Aurelio's, and on a Friday night it wore its own beauty like a costume. Low golden lights strung between exposed ceiling beams, the smell of expensive perfume and cheaper decisions. A DJ in the corner threading something slow and hypnotic through the crowd. It was the kind of place that made everyone feel like the most interesting version of themselves, and Jade had needed exactly that tonight. She had needed a room that didn't know her name, that didn't watch her move through it, that didn't assign meaning to a dress. Brittany was already at a corner table when she arrived, 2 glasses of something sparkling already poured, her blonde hair down and her face doing the thing it did when she was trying to look relaxed and wasn't quite managing it. She stood when she saw Jade and opened her arms, and Jade walked into the hug with the particular relief of a woman who has been holding herself together in a car for 20 minutes and can finally, briefly, put it down. You look incredible, Brittany said, pulling back to look at her. He's insane. He's something, Jade said, and sat down and reached for the glass. The first drink went quickly. The second one was slower. The music shifted into something with more bass, and Jade felt the tension in her shoulders begin to loosen, the knot of the evening beginning to unwind thread by thread. She talked about the dress, about the way he had said it, about the specific quality of his voice that made every instruction sound like a verdict. Brittany listened with the attentiveness of someone who had been waiting a long time for this particular conversation, refilling glasses and making the right sounds, and watching Jade with eyes that held something careful in them. Can I ask you something? Brittany said during a pause between songs. You're going to anyway. When's the last time you went somewhere without telling him first? Jade opened her mouth, closed it. Tonight, she said finally. That's not... Jade, I mean in the last year. The last year and a half. When's the last time you just went somewhere because you wanted to, without him knowing where you were going and when you'd be back and who you'd be with? The question settled over the table like a change in weather. Jade turned her glass slowly on the surface of the table, watching the light move through it, feeling the answer form in her chest before she was ready to say it out loud. The truth was that she had stopped noticing when it happened. There had been no single moment when Jinwoo had said, "You must tell me where you are at all times." It had grown the way things grew in the dark, quietly and without announcement, until the shape of her days had rearranged itself around his awareness of them. It's not like he locks me in, she said. He doesn't... I know, Brittany said. I know he doesn't. That's what makes it so... She stopped, started again. I just want you to be okay, Jade. I want you to be actually okay, not performing okay. Jade looked at her best friend across the table and felt, suddenly and without warning, the specific grief of recognizing something true that you have been successfully not seeing. It moved through her chest like something physical. Not sharp, but wide. The way certain understandings are wide. Too wide to look at all at once. I'm working on it, she said. Brittany nodded. She started to say something else, and then the man sat down. He appeared at the edge of their table without warning, without the performance of approach, the way certain people moved through rooms as though the ordinary social contracts didn't apply to them. He was Korean, late 30s, well-dressed in a way that was studied rather than effortless. A charcoal jacket over a shirt with the top 2 buttons open, hair pushed back, a watch that caught the bar light. His face was pleasant. His eyes were not. He sat in the empty chair beside their table with the ease of a man accepting an invitation that had never been extended. Jade Carter, he said. Not a question. Jade felt the cold move through her before she understood why. Some animal part of her recognized what her mind hadn't processed yet. The way he had said her name with the particular ownership of someone who had been saying it privately for a long time. I'm sorry, she said carefully. Do I know you? No, he smiled. It was a precise smile, controlled at the corners. But I know you. I've known about you for quite some time. He reached for a cocktail napkin from the center of the table and unfolded it with 2 fingers, just to have something to do with his hands. The gesture of a man performing casualness. I know you're a stylist. Very talented. I know you've been engaged for 6 months. I know the ring is 2.4 carats, emerald cut. I know... And here he looked up at her, and something in his eyes shifted, sharpened. That your fiancé asked you to change before you left tonight, and you didn't. The bar continued around them. The music continued. People laughed at other tables, clinked glasses, leaned into each other's ears. The world was entirely ordinary in every direction except this one small table where the air had gone thin. Who are you? Jade said. My name isn't important. What's important? He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed an envelope on the table between them. Is that you give this to Park Jin-woo. He touched the edge of the envelope with 1 finger, sliding it half an inch toward her. Tell him we received his message from last Tuesday. Tell him this is our response. Tell him we look forward to a productive conversation. Brittany had gone very still. Her hands were flat on the table. Jade started. You don't need to understand it, the man said pleasantly. You just need to deliver it. He stood, straightened his jacket. It was a pleasure to meet you, Miss Carter. That dress, by the way. Beautiful choice. Very easy to spot in a crowd. He walked away through the bar and was gone. Jade sat for a moment without moving. Then she picked up the envelope. It was unsealed. Inside was a single photograph, a black and white printout of Jin-woo entering his building, taken from a distance, grainy but unmistakable. On the back of the photograph, written in clean block letters, an address, a date. Tomorrow's date. Her hands were not shaking. She observed this with a distant kind of surprise. She had always thought that if she ever found herself in the middle of something like this, whatever this was, she would shake. But her hands were perfectly still, and her mind was moving very quickly, cataloging details the way she cataloged details for clients. The cut of the man's jacket, The way he had known about the ring. The way he had known she was wearing green tonight. "Jade." Brittany's voice was strange, low. "Jade, I need to tell you something." "In a minute." "No, now. I need to tell you now." Brittany reached across the table and covered Jade's hands with both of hers. "I've known some things about Jinwoo. For a while. Things I didn't tell you because I didn't know how. And because I kept thinking it wasn't my place. And I kept telling myself you were happy and maybe that was enough and… Brittany. He had someone pull your client files. 8 months ago. He ran background checks on 6 of your regular clients, the men, without telling you. I found out through a friend of a friend who works in private security, and I didn't say anything and… I'm sorry, Jade. I'm so sorry. I should have… The door of the bar opened. Park Jinwoo walked in. He did not rush. He moved through the crowd the way he always moved, with that particular stillness that wasn't stillness at all, but the absolute economy of a man who had learned, somewhere along the way, that urgency was a form of weakness. The crowd parted for him without knowing why. 2 men in dark jackets followed at a distance that was carefully not close enough to look like an entourage. He found her table in under 10 seconds. He stood at the edge of it and looked at her. Not at the envelope, not at Brittany, not at the bar around them. Just at Jade. And his face was doing something she had not seen it do before. It was open. Not controlled, not calculated. Just open, in the way of a man who has arrived somewhere he was afraid he might be too late to reach. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." "Did he touch you?" "No." He let out a breath. Just one. Then he looked down at the envelope in her hands, and something moved across his face. A recognition, a resignation, the expression of a man watching a consequence he had tried to outrun arrive exactly on schedule. He pulled out the chair the man from the Kwan family had vacated and sat down, not across from her, beside her. "I owe you an explanation," he said. Jade looked at him for a long moment. The anger was still there. It had not gone anywhere. But underneath it now was something else. Something that had been sitting beneath the anger all evening, patient and waiting. She had a word for it now. Fear. Not of him. Of the size of what she didn't know. "You owe me more than that," she said. He nodded, and said nothing else, because he was, in the particular way of men who have spent their lives controlling information, trying to decide how much truth was survivable. Little did he know, she had already decided she would accept nothing less than all of it. Brittany left first. She gathered her bag with the careful movements of someone who understood that their presence had become a kindness they could no longer offer, pressed her hand once to Jade's shoulder as she passed, and did not look at Jinwoo at all. It was a particular kind of statement, the refusal to acknowledge him. Not dramatic, not announced. Just a woman declining to pretend that everything was ordinary when nothing was ordinary anymore. The door of Aurelio's swung shut behind her, and then it was just the 2 of them at the corner table with the golden light and the music that had shifted again into something slower, something that had no business being played in the middle of a night like this one. Jinwoo had not moved since he sat down. He held no drink. His hands rested on the table, and Jade noticed, with the eyes she had trained over years of looking closely at people, at the way fabric fell and light landed and small details declared themselves, that the knuckle of his right index finger was white. He was pressing it into the table surface without realizing. A hairline fracture in the composure. She placed the envelope between them. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. "How much do you want to know?" he said. It was not the question she had expected. She had expected deflection, justification. the particular architecture of half-truths that intelligent people constructed when they wanted to appear honest without becoming vulnerable. She had not expected that. She had not expected him to hand her the calibration. "Everything," she said. "I told you. Everything." Something shifted in him. It was subtle, a millimeter of change in the set of his shoulders, the way his jaw released the faintest fraction. She had spent 2 years learning his body the way cartographers learned coastlines, every inlet and elevation, and she recognized this. It was the posture of a man setting something heavy down after carrying it alone for a very long time. "The Kwan family," he began, "has been trying to absorb my operation for 26 months. Not destroy it. Absorb it. There is a difference." He spoke quietly, and the music covered his words for anyone more than 3 feet away. "Destroying a network like mine creates chaos. It attracts attention. Federal, local, competitors. Absorbing it is cleaner. You take the infrastructure, the roots, the relationships, and you fold them into your own. The men at the top disappear. Everything else continues." "Disappear," Jade repeated. "Yes." She let that word sit between them without touching it. "And they've been watching you." "They've been watching everything. My warehouses, my businesses, my men. For a long time, they couldn't find an angle. My organization doesn't have obvious weaknesses. I've spent a decade making sure of that." He paused. "And then I met you." The bar noise continued around them. Someone laughed too loudly at the table closest to the door. The DJ layered something new beneath the bassline. Jade sat with the particular stillness of a woman receiving information she had always suspected existed and is now watching it take shape. "I became the weakness," she said. Not a question. "You became the thing I wasn't protecting the way I protect everything else." He looked at her directly, and his eyes held something she had no clean name for. It was not guilt exactly, and it was not love exactly, but it was in the space where those two things met. "I protect my assets by making them invisible. I protect my men by making them dangerous. I didn't know how to protect you without turning you into something you weren't. So you watched me instead." The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. "Brittany told me," Jade said. "The background checks on my clients. 8 months ago." He did not flinch. He had the discipline not to flinch, but the white knuckle pressed harder into the table. "4 of your regular male clients had connections I couldn't verify. 2 of them had indirect ties to the Kwan network. Not operatives. Civilians with business relationships they probably didn't fully understand. But I couldn't be certain." "You could have told me that." "I could have." "You could have said, 'Jade, I need you to know that 2 of your clients may have ties to people who want to hurt me, and I want you to be careful.' You could have treated me like someone capable of handling information about my own life." "Yes," he said. "I could have." The simplicity of it landed harder than any argument would have. She had prepared herself, in the Uber coming here, for deflection, for the version of this conversation where he explained and justified and reframed until the thing that had been done to her looked different in a better light. She had not prepared herself for this. A man who was not going to pretend. "The trip to Seoul," she said. She watched his face. "Last March. My client Denise had a show. She asked me to come. I was going to, and then the booking fell through and I couldn't understand why because Denise said she never canceled, and her assistant said the same thing." Jinwoo said nothing. "Was that you?" "Yes." She closed her eyes, opened them. There was a photographer, David Park. He hired me for a campaign in the spring. We had 3 meetings. After the 3rd one, he stopped returning my calls and the campaign disappeared. I thought it was budget issues. He was warned off. By you. By one of my men, on my instruction. She absorbed this. She thought about David Park, who had been funny and professional and had brought very good coffee to every meeting, and who had looked mildly terrified the last time she had tried to reach him. She thought about Seoul, about the trip she had almost taken that had somehow unmade itself. She thought about all the small disappearances she had cataloged over 2 years and filed under coincidence because the alternative required a restructuring of her entire understanding of her own life. "How many times?" she said. "Jade, how many times did you make a decision about my life without asking me?" He was quiet for a moment. The honest kind of quiet, not the strategic kind. "I don't have an exact number." "Estimate." He looked at her with those dark eyes that had watched her from across a room for 2 years, and she had loved the attention and never asked what it was made of. "Enough," he said, "that I cannot defend it. I'm not going to try." What she felt in that moment was not the clean, clarifying rage she might have expected. Rage would have been easier. What she felt was something more like grief. The specific grief of understanding that 2 true things can exist simultaneously. That she had been genuinely loved, and that the love had been genuinely harmful. That the man across from her had kept her safe from things she didn't know existed, and had quietly, methodically, dismantled parts of her freedom in the process. That he had carried a weight so long alone that he had forgotten to ask whether she was capable of carrying it with him. "The dress," she said. "Tonight. You knew they were going to be here." "I knew there was a strong probability. We intercepted a communication 3 days ago. The Kwan family had identified you, had photographs, knew your typical patterns. Tonight was a girls' night. They knew that too. They knew where Brittany lived, that she frequented this area." He paused. "The green dress was... You were going to be very visible, Jade. That was the point. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I was trying to make you invisible for 1 night." She looked at the envelope on the table between them. At the photograph inside of it, the address on the back. Tomorrow's date. "What does this mean?" she said. "This date. It means they want to meet. It means they're done with the indirect approach." Something moved through his expression. Not fear, because she had never seen fear on his face, and she was not certain he was capable of it in the ordinary sense. But something adjacent to it. Respect for a threat. "It means the situation has changed." "Changed how?" "It means I have to make a decision by tomorrow morning that I have been avoiding making for 6 months." "What decision?" He looked at her for a long moment across the small table in the bar in West Hollywood, with the music pressing around them and the city doing its indifferent glittering beyond the windows. He looked at her the way he had looked at her the very first night, like she was the only thing in the room worth protecting. But she understood it differently now. She understood that there was a version of protection that held you close, and a version that held you still, and that loving someone was not the same as knowing the difference. "Whether to walk away from all of it," he said. "The network, the operation, everything I built." The words fell into the space between them and stayed there. "For me?" she said. "Because of you," he said. "There's a difference." She sat with that distinction, felt the weight of it, the precision of it. Because of you was not the same as for you. Because of you meant she had changed the calculation without being asked to. Because of you meant he had arrived at a conclusion through his own accounting, without making her responsible for the cost. She did not say anything for a long time. Outside, somewhere in the Los Angeles grid, 2 black SUVs were moving back toward Koreatown, their mission incomplete. Their employer waiting for a report on a woman in a green dress who had been delivered an envelope and was still sitting in a bar with the man they had sent it to. Tomorrow was coming. "Tell me about the decision," Jade said. "All of it. Start from the beginning." And Park Jin-woo, who had never in his adult life explained himself to anyone, opened his mouth and began. He talked for a long time, not the way men like him usually talked, in controlled portions, in information rationed like water in a drought, each sentence measured against what it revealed and what it protected. He talked the way a man talks when he has decided, somewhere between one breath and the next, that the architecture of careful omission he has been living inside has finally cost more than it is worth. He talked the way a man talks when he is tired. Not physically tired. Jin-woo had the endurance of someone who had spent 20 years in conditions that would have broken ordinary people. But tired in the deeper register. Tired of being the only person in the room who knew the whole story. He told her about his father first. Not because she had asked, she hadn't, but because she had said, "Start from the beginning," and he had understood, perhaps for the first time, that the beginning was not 26 months ago when the Kwon family first appeared on his radar. The beginning was a small apartment in Busan, 2 decades before Los Angeles existed in his imagination as anything other than a name. A father who had built something from nothing, who had constructed a network of loyalty and fear in equal measure, who had believed, with the absolute conviction of a man who has never been wrong about anything that matters, that the people closest to him were the safest people in his world. His mother had died because of that conviction. Not violently, not the way people died in the stories told about men like Jin-woo's father. She had died slowly, in the particular way that women died when they were kept so close to the center of something dangerous that the danger became the air they breathed. She had died knowing things she had never been told directly, understanding a world she had never been invited to understand, carrying the weight of a life that had been built around her without her consent. By the time Jin-woo was 17, she was gone, and his father had stood at her grave with the expression of a man who genuinely did not understand what he had done. That was the inheritance. Not the network, not the money, not the particular set of skills that had made Jin-woo both feared and useful to a succession of powerful people on 2 continents. The real inheritance was a blueprint for how love became a trap without ever intending to. A demonstration, delivered across an entire childhood, of what happened when a man decided that keeping someone safe and keeping someone informed were incompatible goals. Jin-woo had watched his father at that grave and made a private promise that he would never be that man. He had become that man anyway. Not through malice, not through the conscious decision to control, through something quieter and more insidious than either. Through the accumulated weight of small choices made at the intersection of love and fear, each one reasonable in isolation, each one a millimeter further from the person he had intended to be. He had run background checks on her clients because 2 of them had connections he couldn't verify, and that was true, and that was a real concern. But he had not stopped at 2. He had checked all of them. He had checked her friends. He had checked the building where her studio was located, had quietly arranged for additional security there without telling her, had fielded a report every week from a man whose job was to know whether Jade Carter moved through the world safely. He told her all of this. He told her about the photographer, about Seoul, about a dinner reservation in December that had never been canceled by the restaurant, but that she had received a cancellation notice for nonetheless. He told her about the 3 times in 18 months he had arrived, not by coincidence, at a location where she was because someone on his payroll had flagged a situation he deemed worth monitoring personally. He told her about the moment 8 months ago when he had understood that what he was doing had crossed a line he had told himself he would never cross, and about how he had stood in his office on the 53rd floor, looking at a report on her movements, and had felt, for the first time in his adult life, ashamed. And he told her about the Kwan family. All of it. The 26 months of pressure, the attempts to peel away his alliances, the 2 men he had lost. Not to violence, but to money. To offers that made loyalty look like a bad investment. He told her about the communication 3 days ago, about the photograph they had taken of her, about the specific language the Kwan family had used, which was not the language of men who intended to hurt her, but the language of men who intended to use her. To make Jinwoo understand clearly and without ambiguity that his one visible vulnerability had been located and cataloged and could be activated at any time of their choosing. He told her about the decision he had been sitting with for 6 months. Walking away from a network like his was not simple. It was not a resignation letter, not a retirement announcement. It was a negotiation conducted in the particular dialect of men who did not forgive weakness, and it required leverage and timing and the willingness to accept that some of what he had built would be lost in the process. He had been in contact quietly with a federal intermediary, a channel opened 18 months ago that he had not acted on because acting on it required him to accept that the life he had constructed was one he was choosing to end. And he had not been ready. He was ready now. "The meeting tomorrow," he said, "is not what the Kwan family thinks it is." Jade looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I have been arranging for the last 3 months for that meeting to be the last conversation the Kwan family's leadership has as a functioning organization." He said it with no particular drama, the way he said most things. Flatly, as though the weight of words should be carried by their content and not their delivery. "The federal intermediary will be present. Not at the meeting, nearby. What happens at that address tomorrow ends the Kwan family's operation and ends mine simultaneously." The bar had thinned around them. The DJ was winding down, the golden light slightly warmer as the crowd thinned, the city outside the windows doing its permanent, indifferent shimmer. "You were going to do this without telling me?" Jade said. "Yes." "You were going to walk away from everything you built, make a decision that affects both of our lives, put yourself in a room with federal intermediaries and the leadership of a criminal organization, and I was going to wake up tomorrow morning knowing none of this." He held her gaze. "Yes." She nodded slowly. Not in acceptance, in the particular acknowledgement of a woman who has just had the exact shape of the problem confirmed. "Do you understand," she said, "why that is the same thing? Even though the outcome is good, even though you are doing the right thing, do you understand why making that decision without me is the same pattern?" The silence that followed was the longest of the evening. The DJ played one final song, and the remaining crowd moved with it, and Jinwoo sat across from Jade Carter in the emptying bar and understood, for the first time with his whole self, rather than just the intellectual part of it, what she was saying. Not that his choices had been wrong in their conclusions, not that protecting her had been wrong, but that the act of deciding alone, of making her life's landscape without her hand on the map, was the wound, regardless of the intention behind it. His mother had died inside a life built around her without her consent, and he had spent 20 years telling himself he would never do that. And he had done it anyway, in a different key, with better intentions, and the same essential architecture. The inheritance. "Yes," he said quietly. "I understand." Jade picked up the envelope from the table. She turned it over once in her hands, looked at the address, looked at the date. Then she set it down and looked at him with the expression of a woman who has arrived at a decision through the full weight of everything she knows and is not going to be moved from it by anything less than the truth. "I'm not going to tell you to cancel tomorrow," she said. "I understand why it has to happen. I understand what the alternative looks like." She paused. "But I am going to tell you what happens after." He waited. "After tomorrow," she said, "there are no more reports. No more background checks. No more canceled trips or warned-off photographers or security arrangements I don't know about. If you believe I am in danger, you tell me. If you need me to change a plan, you explain why. You treat me like someone who is capable of living in the truth of what our life actually is, not a managed version of it." She leaned forward slightly. "And if you can't do that, if the pattern is too deep, if the inheritance is too heavy, then I need to know that too. Because I will not be your mother, Jinwoo. I will not live inside a life that was built around me. I will not find out at the end what the shape of it was." The last song ended. The bar was nearly empty. Outside, Los Angeles continued its permanent performance of itself, indifferent and glittering, full of people navigating the distance between what they meant and what they did. Park Jin-woo reached across the table. Not to take her hand. He did not take it, did not assume. He placed his hand on the table beside hers, open, palm up. An offering rather than a claim. The gesture of a man who has spent his whole life gripping things and is learning, at considerable personal cost, what it feels like to simply hold something out. She looked at his hand for a long moment, at the tattoos that climbed his neck in the low light, the dragon coiling behind his ear, the Hanja characters she had traced with her fingers 100 times without ever asking what they said. She thought she might ask, after tonight. She thought there were a great many things she was going to ask, now that asking had become possible. She placed her hand in his. "What did the tattoo say?" she said. He looked at her, that open expression, the one she had not seen before tonight, the one that made him look less like the man who controlled rooms and more like the boy from Busan who had stood at a grave and made a promise he hadn't known how to keep. "The one on the left," he said, "says, 'What is protected must first be trusted.'" A pause. "My father had it translated wrong when he gave it to me. He thought it said something else." "What did he think it said?" "What is loved must be kept close." Jade looked at him for a long time in the quiet of the nearly empty bar while the city shone outside and the night moved toward whatever morning was going to bring. The meeting, the decision, the beginning of whatever came after the life he was ending. "They're not that different," she said finally. "No," he said. "That's the problem." She did not let go of his hand, and the city outside went on being beautiful, the way cities did, without knowing or caring what had just shifted in a corner table in a bar in West Hollywood. What compact had been made, what inheritance had been named, and for the first time, consciously refused. Tomorrow was coming. But tonight, for the first time in longer than either of them could clearly remember, they were in the same room, knowing the same things, holding the same map. It was not safety. It was not certainty. It was something more difficult and more valuable than either of those. It was honesty. And for now, just for now, it was enough. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been protected by someone in a way that slowly, quietly took something from you? And by the time you noticed, you didn't know whether to feel grateful or betrayed. Have you ever loved someone deeply and still had to look them in the eye and say, "The way you love me is hurting me"? And have you ever had to choose between the safety of silence and the terrifying, necessary work of finally demanding the truth? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about honesty, freedom, and the kind of love that has to be rebuilt to survive, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.